begins with a shock quote overlay. Robyn wasn't Kody's downfall, she was his destiny gone wrong. Mellow, contemplative piano accompaniment to slow footage of Flagstaff highways deserted. The narrator comes in with a subdued, inquiring voice. Every empire has a moment it begins to crumble. For Kody Brown, that moment had a name, Robyn. We immediately illustrate the contrast between initial happiness and subsequent desolation. A loop of curiosity is created. How could a single marriage break up an entire religious family? And if you think this was all about love, wait until you see what it actually cost. It started as nothing more than a whisper, a soft murmur hidden beneath years of carefully constructed television grins and scripted confessions. But whispers have a tendency to grow, particularly when the truth they hold is not willing to remain silent. Among the endless dinner scenes of family, plural love, and beautifully framed togetherness, a hole existed, someone was missing. Her name was Eliza. The initial seasons of Sister Wives created an image of peace. 4 wives, 1 husband, 1 religion, 1 vision, to show the world they were right about polygamy. But behind closed doors, the cracks were already forming. Fans recall Kody's over-the-top ego, how he'd take over a room with charm and swagger. But not what they couldn't see, the locked files, the cut-off calls, and the woman whose name was removed from every initial contract. Eliza's existence first surfaced through a handful of fragments, an old photo, a birth record, a forgotten family document that listed a spiritual union predating Kody's televised marriages. Fans brushed it off as rumor at first. After all, TLC never mentioned a 5th wife. But as more clues emerged, silence became impossible to ignore. Others claim that Eliza was present in the Brown family's earliest days in Wyoming, before the cameras, before the fame, before Kody became TV's face of polygamy. What pushed Eliza out of the narrative? Was it by choice, or design? Those who knew the Browns up close spoke of her as the quiet one, a loyal but introverted person who questioned the emotional price of Kody's increasing ambition. When TLC came to the family, insiders say Eliza declined to appear, refusing to put her spiritual marriage on television. Her absence, however, wasn't just personal, it was shielded. The terms of the Sister Wives contract called for explicit family composition, names, and legality. And Eliza, who was off the books, was an issue they couldn't risk explaining. It was a quiet but intentional choice to wipe her out. Within a few months, all reference to her was gone, photos burned, documents rewritten, and a new legend created. 4 wives, 1 large family. Even the most thorough erasures leave residues. In a discovered clip of early behind-the-scenes footage, a shadowy figure sits next to Kody in a pre-production interview, her hand for an instant before the camera cuts away. Another filing indicates Christine mentioning someone else who didn't want to be filmed, a phrase quickly edited out before airing. Internet forums erupted years later, drawing connections no one at TLC wished to be made. And as Christine, Janelle, and Mary started to split away, pieces of the past came flooding back. In one tearful live stream, Christine alluded to some stories were never ours to tell. There was a sense of mystery about it for the fans, but for the people who knew of Eliza, it was verification. The missing 5th wife wasn't something dreamed up. She was part of the secret history that dogged the Browns from the start. Now the question resonates louder than ever: what did actually happen to Eliza? Was she pushed out to shield the family's reputation? Or did she opt to disappear before fame could warp her life into another screenplay? Whatever the reality, what is certain, the tale that was presented to us was never the complete truth. And the silence over Eliza wasn't unintentional. It was designed. Because sometimes, the most shocking secrets aren't the ones shouted on camera, they're the ones whispered off-screen, waiting years for someone to finally listen. What if that someone is us? For years, Eliza was only glimpsed in pieces, a whispered name in secret, a shadow hazed by time. But when the silence finally shattered, it wasn't an accident. It started with a solitary discovery, an old video file with the title Family Intro 2009, raw footage. The file, purportedly leaked by an ex-TLC production assistant, uncovered a secret the world wasn't supposed to know. The tape cut to Kody Brown, younger, with his agitated energy, introducing his family prior to recording the first season. His voice was chattering, bold, the salesman of his own name. But as he ran off, his wives standing beside him, there was a hesitation. His eyes flicked off stage. And there, for an instant, stood a woman. Auburn locks, tranquil eyes, a gentle smile that looked misplaced in the mad whirl of light and names. She did not say anything. She did not have to. That one instant revived the legend of Eliza. Others who came forward later characterized her as the wife before the wives. A humble person who was deeply committed to faith and covenant, not to fame or publicity. It was Eliza, they said, who first brought Kody into the community of believers who practiced polygamy. Prior to Mary, prior to Janelle, prior to Christine, there was she. She was the spiritual foundation of a life that Kody later constructed into a public dynasty. But once the lights of television shone in, everything was transformed. Eliza was said to have fought the show, objecting to the morality of commodifying their holy family ties. Her reluctance was deemed rebellion. In a world with a preoccupation of control and image, defiance was a sin. The Brown family's representation had to be wholesome, attractive, likable. One husband. 4 wives. No contradictions. No specters of the past. One by one, her memories were erased, the photographs, the written testimony, even the legal records of a spiritual union that existed long before Mary's courtship. Only a few handwritten notes survived, buried in an old family Bible that once belonged to Kody's father. Inside it, written in faded ink, were the words, "Love without truth is illusion." It was signed, Eliza. That phrase would come to characterize everything that ensued. When the gossip surfaced again online, the fans cried for answers. TLC had nothing to say. Kody wrote off the report in interviews as nonsense gossip. But something in his demeanor faltered, the same fidgety pause, the same strained laughter that viewers later detected whenever Christine or Janelle spoke of the past. Christine, however, had the most baggage to bear. On a reunion taping, when asked about family history early on, she smiled weakly and replied, "Some of us remember different beginnings." The producer switched topics in seconds. But those early beginnings never remained buried. Former Wyoming neighbors remembered spotting Kody with a woman who wasn't one of the 4 wives during their first few years of faith get-togethers. She was described as being very religious, routinely reading aloud during family study sessions, but soon faded away after the family relocated to Utah. Some claim that Eliza quit because she had seen the storm brewing, the cameras, the contracts, the exposure. Others are convinced that she was driven away to maintain the illusion of togetherness that TLC insisted upon. Regardless, her departure created a space that influenced every wife who succeeded her. Because when a story begins with erasure, the ghosts never leave. They linger in the spaces between smiles, in the words unsaid, in the glances exchanged when the cameras stop rolling. And Eliza, the woman who began it all, remains the one the show could never rewrite completely. They attempted to wipe her out of the record. They made her unforgettable instead. When Eliza disappeared from the family narrative, something quietly irreversible took hold, a crack that no one would speak aloud. On the outside, to the world, the Brown family was a model of cohesion, radiating faith and confidence. But in the shadows of closed doors, in the early years of Sister Wives, that unspoken gap whispered its way through every discussion, every tense smile, every muted dinner that was over too soon. Mary noticed it first. She was the first wife in public legend, but privately she knew there was always a shadow on her title. There were times when Kody froze in mid-sentence, his eyes elsewhere, as if recalling a page he could never cite. When Mary asked him once why some of those early family pictures had been deleted before cameras rolled, he had replied, "It's cleaner this way." Cleaner. That was a word that lingered with her. Because love isn't meant to have to be edited. For Janelle, tension was more of a pragmatic than emotional nature. She saw discrepancies in their finances, stale accounts that appeared to go nowhere. Small sums taken out, unfamiliar names she didn't know listed in community contributions. When she confronted Kody about it, he dismissed it with his characteristic optimism, "It's just old family stuff." But Janelle's gut was telling her otherwise. She started to connect the dots: an old letter, a duplicate birth certificate, a date that didn't fit the official narrative. Every clue led back to a secret the family had suppressed. And then there was Christine, the emotional core of the family, the glue that kept everyone bonded. She missed Eliza not with suspicion, but with the soft loneliness that rested in Kody's eyes when he talked of the early years. He would tell of his introduction into plural marriage as if it had begun mid-air, leaving out its actual genesis. Christine wondered endlessly why he never discussed his spiritual leader, the man who had brought him to the faith. Subsequently, she understood that mentor was not just a guide, it was Eliza herself. The emotional aftermath accumulated quietly, like cracks beneath glazed glass. Kody grew increasingly defensive whenever someone brought up the past. TLC producers urged him to stay forward-focused, to keep the narrative light, family-friendly, marketable. But with each season, that hidden truth eroded the framework of his plural marriage. Because when one foundation stone is missing, the house will always tilt. And it did. The wives began to feel that tilt in ways they couldn't explain. Mary's laughter became less frequent. Janelle spent more time away, drawn to independence and structure. Christine, once radiant with warmth, began questioning her own worth in a system that seemed designed to erase individuality. The spirit of Eliza was never mean. She did not come back to wreck the family, she was already part of its fabric. Yet her absence tormented Kody. When he was under stress, his anger flared in an instant. He attributed it to media pressure and miscommunication, but the reality went deeper. It was guilt for manipulating history, for erasing a woman's love and devotion as if they were a cutout scene. And if you think that's tragic, wait until you witness how that guilt had become resentment that would compel Kody to make the choices that shattered everything. In a moment of candor, years afterward, Christine told a close friend, "Sometimes I think we were all living in Eliza's shadow, even if we didn't know it." Those words proved to be prophetic. For shadows cast longer when the light starts to dim. Kody's empire, founded on unity and religious equilibrium, was starting to creak at the joints. And soon, the cracks would become chasms so wide, not even faith, let alone fame, could heal them. The cracks that started within the Brown household did not remain concealed for long. On television, they smiled and laughed and prayed in harmony. But beneath the impeccably composed scenes and meticulously cut confessionals, a subtle tempest was brewing, one that would ultimately reveal how weak the ground beneath their family legacy truly was. By the time Sister Wives reached its height of popularity, the Browns were a cultural icon, America's most famous plural family. TLC had established the image of equilibrium, for wives, one man, a contemporary spin on religion and family. But all legends have a missing page, and in theirs, that page was Eliza. With fans becoming increasingly invested, questions started being asked again. Internet detectives cross-checked early family photos with later ones, spotting missing blocks in timelines and unknown faces out of focus in the back. A few said they remembered a woman at early church gatherings, off to one side but always close to Kody. Her face showed up in several early fan blogs before suddenly vanishing. It wasn't long before rumor became inquiry. One former crew member revealed anonymously that at the beginning of filming, there had been debate over whether to feature a prior family figure, but the idea was nixed for legal and emotional reasons. TLC supposedly wanted to keep things simple, fearing to complicate matters would confuse viewers and break the show's tidy moral framework. But secrets have a way of surviving silence. As seasons went by, audiences saw something else, the emotional mood changing. What started as a tale of unity and trust gradually turned into one of division, bitterness, and dominance. The viewers who initially watched for harmony now remained for the revelation. And in that unraveling, Eliza's ghost became symbolic. They referred to her as the missing wife, a symbol of all the things the show wouldn't tell out loud, the sacrifices, the promises made and broken, the compromises that were made for stardom. Within the family, the emotional toll was undeniable. Mary's emotional distance became visible in her strained interviews. Janelle's focus drifted toward independence. Christine began questioning not just Kody's decisions, but the entire system that had asked her to share a man's love while hiding another woman's existence. Even Robyn, the one that Kody purported to love the most, was not able to escape the ripple. Her entrance had marked the family's public downfall, yet in private, she was tormented by the whispers too. She was said to have discovered old family keepsakes stored away that bore initials that were not hers or the other wives'. It was as if she'd inherited a legacy of omission. At the same time, Kody doubled down on domination. He held more tightly to the fantasy of leadership, to the tale that he was still the spiritual leader of a holy family. But leadership founded on guilt turns into domination, not direction. And the harder Kody worked to keep the fantasy alive, the more the fantasy disappeared. The Browns' legacy, originally meant to promote understanding and acceptance, started to represent the perils of repression, of making reality a form of entertainment. The ratings of the show lived on its turmoil, but the integrity of the family died a slow death. And somewhere in that gradual disintegration, the tale of Eliza was altered from hearsay into reflection, a mirror to all the things the Browns did not wish to perceive. When Christine finally parted ways, fans labeled it freedom. When Janelle pulled away, they labeled it strength. When Mary faded into obscurity and silence, they labeled it closure. But maybe what actually came to an end wasn't so much a marriage, but the pretense of control over truth. Because truth does not disappear when concealed, it grows in the shadows. And that's exactly what happened next, when the evidence no one expected suddenly resurfaced, threatening to expose everything TLC tried to bury. When the first whispers of the Eliza files began to circulate online, most people dismissed them as conspiracy, the kind of rumor that naturally grows around fame. But then came the evidence. It began quietly, as a spark in a dry plain, a cryptic Reddit posting, a photocopied document, and a fuzzy picture that seemed to depict Kody with a woman not one of his known wives. At first glance, it might have been anyone, a friend, a cousin, a church member. But the facts did not lie. The writing in the corner said, Spring 1990, our covenant day. And there it was, under the faint mark, Kody and Eliza. It was the first irrefutable fissure in a narrative that had been staged for more than a decade. The internet went wild. Message boards were filled with side-by-side images, timelines, even legal hypotheses. If the relationship was spiritual, as opposed to legal, then technically, there was no marriage to wipe away. Morally? Emotionally? That was a whole different matter. And it wasn't just cyber chattering anymore. Old friends of the Brown family spoke out. One woman, who'd known them in their early Wyoming days, spoke of Eliza as a peaceful presence who wanted peace, not spotlight. Another said that Eliza was the first to urge Kody to open his heart to plural love, only to be turned away when fame required a sanitized version of truth. Kody never directly confronted these allegations. Instead, he deflected bitterly, blaming outsiders for feeding lies for clicks. Even his devoted audience sensed something in him, a defensiveness that tipped toward desperation. TLC remained silent, making no formal announcement. But fans did see that some of the older shows started vanishing from the internet, especially the episodes that included family retrospectives or mentions of early pre-marriage spiritual connections. It was like somebody was quietly brushing away the breadcrumbs before anyone could pick them up. But by then, the damage had been done. Because each time they attempted to erase the past, new pieces surfaced, in interviews, long-forgotten photographs, even in small comments made by the wives themselves. In a rare tell-all, Janelle shook when asked if there were unspoken histories behind the family's origin. She hesitated, then mentioned, Some stories aren't mine to share, but they shaped everything. And in that quiet, you could sense the weight of decades. What started as a tale of faith and oneness had turned into something sinister, a reflection of secrecy, control, and the price of perfection. The legacy of the Brown family, which was once characterized by courage and faith, was now mired in the darkness of what they chose not to face. But the larger question still hung: if Eliza really did exist, if she was the first, the foundation, the erased, what else had been rewritten? How much of what we saw was real, and how much was production? How many confessions were scripted? How many family fights were condensed to fit a narrative that glossed over the actual cause of hurt? And most eerily of all, what if Eliza's vanishing act wasn't voluntary, either? To this day, no one knows where she went, or even if she viewed the show that took her place. Some speculate she lives on in secret under an assumed identity. Others believe she died long before Sister Wives ever premiered. But one thing is certain: the tale of Eliza debunked the legend of the Brown family's perfection. It was evidence that even the most publicized lies concealed the deepest truths, and that all legacies founded upon half a tale eventually are met with the other half. So now the question rests with us, with every viewer who ever accepted the show's smiling beginnings. Was Eliza merely forgotten, or intentionally wiped away? And if the truth ever comes out entirely, would it bring down what's left of the Sister Wives empire, or finally free it? When the lights finally went out and cameras were stashed away, what was left of the Brown family was no longer the smiling picture that once dominated Sunday nights. The laughter, the faith circles, the vows of eternal togetherness, all of them dissolved into echoes. What was left behind was a man, a woman, and a silence so heavy that even the walls of their Flagstaff house appeared to carry its burden. For Kody, it was punishment. For Robyn, it was confusion. They had lived for years thinking that they were the final pair, the elect who had weathered the tempest of envy, public attention, and sorrow. And as the other wives slipped away, each one of them, the fantasy of being chosen started to warp into loneliness. The empire that had once centered on him had folded inward, and the cameras that had made him a king now stood as witnesses to his downfall. Late-night reports reported that Robyn's tears, once written off as drama, were now perpetual. She had yearned to have a family, not a throne. And yet, somehow, she had ended up the last wife standing in a kingdom of ghosts. Every time she walked past the vacant bedrooms that had been full of laughter and chaos, the silence pushed further into her chest. And Kody, once the self-assured patriarch, now resembled a man attempting to make deals with the remnants of his own destruction. In interviews, he had discussed betrayal, how his wives had lost their faith, yet those who knew him best described his words as empty. For behind closed doors, Kody had started to doubt everything: his vocation, his leadership, even the divine mission he once used to excuse every choice. They claim truth always comes too late, but it comes nonetheless. And when the story of Eliza came back to life in the dark corners of the internet, Kody's new reality started to contract. Fans overwhelmed his social media with queries. Comment threads were filled with one name: Eliza. The more he ignored it, the louder it grew. Robyn, already vulnerable, pleaded with him to let the past remain buried. But guilt doesn't remain buried, not when it forms the base of everything you possess. Their union, which had originally been founded on mutual belief, was now cracking under the pressure of ancient secrets. Gossip echoed within the inner circle that Robyn felt tricked into inheriting someone else's curse. She believed she was part of a heritage of belief, not the icon of its downfall. There were disagreements. Days spent in silence. Nights spent by Kody sitting on the porch alone, looking out into the black desert, as though trying to find something he had lost a long time ago. Robyn, for her part, reduced filming to a lesser frequency, staying out of the limelight. Her once tightly managed persona of the devoted wife fell apart into that of a haunted woman, tormented by decisions she never made. And if you think the heartbreak stopped there, wait until you see how far the fallout went. Because what Kody lost wasn't merely his wives, it was faith in the narrative he presented to the world. His family's tumble from their throne became a lesson etched in real time: that no empire founded on half-truths can endure the complete burden of fact. The Brown name that was once synonymous with strength and belief now dangled in midair like a warning sign. TLC kept its silence deafening. No reunion, no spin-offs, no press releases. Just the faint specter of a tale that had finally moved beyond its own fantasy. And in that vacuum, only one question lingered, not for the cameras, not for the crowd, but for Kody himself. Was Robyn ever actually his last love, or merely the last to witness his fall? When the news broke, the web was aflame. It wasn't whispers anymore, it was a full-blown hurricane. Headlines dominated social media streams. The forgotten wife. Did TLC cover up Kody's secret marriage? Viewers who had followed the Browns for more than a decade felt betrayed, as if the family they'd come to emotionally invest in had been constructed on falsehoods. And that was it, the previously insulated sister-wives image shattered in front of the world's eyes. Moments from previous seasons were brought back in viral montages. What were once thought to be harmless moments now played out like manipulation scenes. Kody brushing off queries about his early relationships. Mary fidgeting nervously when the subject of the beginning was mentioned. Christine's wry smile when she'd say, "We all started somewhere." Every shot was re-evaluated through the filter of the Eliza news, and the world couldn't help but see it. The backlash came hard and swift. Fans called for transparency. Veteran TLC crew members started making cryptic statements, suggesting that a lot more was filmed than ever aired. Anonymous insiders reported entire interview segments were cut, especially those done during the show's first year, moments that supposedly named someone who didn't want to be part of the spotlight. And then there was the ultimate shock. A minor YouTube channel, which specialized in delving into reality TV gossip, posted what they referred to as the unedited tape. The video seemed to be of a young Kody talking of spiritual unions prior to marry, footage never to air on TV. The tape was low resolution, the audio muddled, but the voice, it was his without a doubt. The internet blew up. In hours, the clip became trending on several sites. Hashtags such as #WhoWasEliza and #SisterWivesTruth overwhelmed all feeds. The family's highly controlled image dissolved quicker than anyone could have envisioned. In their secluded Flagstaff home, Robyn was seen sobbing, browsing through the deluge of comments questioning her integrity, her innocence, even the future of her children. She had been made the poster face of the show's hypocrisy, the lady who won the husband but lost the public. Kody, however, attempted to push back. He issued a video message, angry, shaking, and evasive. He flatly denied any secret marriage, affirming that spiritual connections prior to marry were private and not formalized. But what came across was only to heighten suspicion. Because what the audience listened to wasn't resolve, it was terror. And terror spreads quicker than fact. Producers remained mum, but rumors spread that TLC was auditing contracts, cleaning out archives, and putting new projects on hold. The network that once celebrated the Brown family as a testament to faith now had a crisis of its own reputation. Advertisers withdrew. The fan sites for the show split between its defenders and seekers of the truth. But in the midst of the mayhem, something incredible occurred. Christine, now independent, broke her silence. Her tone was soft, bordering on elegy, as she uttered, "We all had our reasons for staying quiet." But silence protects no one. Those lines cut deeper than any leaked footage. They were the battle cry for 1,000 viewers who had once marveled at her depth and resilience. Janelle was next, validating that there were things we were told never to talk about. She didn't say Eliza's name. She didn't need to. For the first time, the truth was no longer hearsay, it was confirmation. The decades-old story that had been kept under wraps had finally emerged, not by way of tabloids or producers, but by the women who experienced it. And if you thought that was the end of the reckoning, it wasn't. Because the storm had only just started, and the next wave wasn't about secrets. It was about accountability. The inquiry wasn't merely whom Kody once loved, but whom he had sacrificed to keep his empire going. The storm had passed, But the deafening silence that descended afterward was even more chilling. Cameras went dark, fans were left stunned, and the Brown family's name started to break down into rumors. But amidst that silence deep within, there was one fact that stood: Eliza's life had altered everything. Christine, alone now, gazed back not in anger, but in clarity. "Perhaps we were never supposed to know everything," she once told a podcast interviewer, "but we were supposed to know what truth costs." Her words struck millions like a testimony from someone who had passed through the fire and came out alive. Mary's eyes spoke a different tale: years of clinging, struggling to be heard, only to find out she had been in competition with a phantom. She no longer sought closure, she had come to terms with not having all the answers. "Sometimes," she confessed softly, "the truth isn't what heals you. It's accepting that you might never get it." Kody, though, was still the mystery, the man amidst a whirlwind of secrets. Rumors indicated he attempted to get back with some individuals in his history, maybe trying to rewrite the story before things got out of hand. TLC, the master puppeteer, said nothing. No confirmations, no refutations, just repeats, satiating an audience craving more. And then the video. A clip, long buried in production footage databases, appeared anonymously on a fan site. Hazy but genuine, Eliza standing next to Kody in a bright backyard, clutching a tiny handwritten promise note. No sound. Just the visual. In a matter of hours, it was removed, censored under copyright complaints. Too late, though. The internet already knew. The evidence nobody believed even existed had finally taken a breath. The sister-wives' empire shook once more. What had been a journey of faith and love had become an object lesson in power, hypocrisy, and the illusions we create before the camera. Each confession, each cry, each family choice had been part of a larger puzzle that now fit chillingly together. Supporters swarmed comment boards and forums, debating whether the clip was authentic, if Eliza was indeed his legal or spiritual spouse, or merely another installment in a tale too crazy to be true. But to those people who had been along for the ride from the start, it didn't matter anymore. The emotional reality had already struck. The Browns were no longer the embodiment of polygamy's potential, they were now a mirror image of what occurs when truth is hidden under performance. Every promise had its shadow. Every love had its price. And in the end, the cameras had recorded more than anyone wanted. Breaking free, the untold story of life after polygamy had come full circle, not as a story of betrayal, but of awakening. The narrative had started with secrets and concluded with silence, but somewhere within that silence was freedom. For Christine, Mary, Janelle, and maybe even for Eliza. Because sometimes liberty doesn't arrive when the cameras shut off. It arrives when the truth, in spite of its hurt, finally refuses to remain concealed. And as the final line dissolves into view, some vows were meant to be broken. The audience is left gazing up at that last shot, the shredded marriage certificate blowing in the wind, light slicing through the edges of the paper, and the slight sheen of a TLC camera still rolling. The truth had been told. And this time, there was no way to delete it. Leave a comment below what you think the secret footage really uncovered, and remember to subscribe to Sister Wife Daily Scoop for the next installment of truth they attempted to hide. Months later, but the reverberations of Eliza's disclosure would not be silenced. All the media had analyzed it, all the fan sites had become investigation teams, and yet, the deeper everyone dug, the spookier the silence was. Sister Wives' reality was no longer the same, the facade of unity dissolved, replaced by the haunting loveliness of truth at last visible. Christine was living proof that freedom could be born of ashes. Her laughter, once strained under the burdens of performance, now cut through the atmosphere of her new house like a soft defiance. She no longer had to explain her decisions to anyone. "Things cannot be rebuilt that were never honest," she once declared in an interview, her tone firm but measured. Those words weren't about Kody alone. They were about every secret woman, every stifled truth, every promise spoken in the shadows. Mary had walked away too, this time not in agony, but in acceptance. She opened a retreat high up in the mountains, one she named Haven Hollow. Guests called it serene, almost holy. Some claimed that you could sense the heaviness of letting go there, as if the land itself had taken in decades of unspoken sorrow. When questioned whether she had forgiven Kody, Mary just smiled. Forgiveness has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with freeing yourself. And Kody, once the epitome of an empire constructed on spirituality of unity, now roamed in the wreckage of his own tale. Some have said he attempted to find Eliza, others that he disappeared from public life altogether. But periodically, a photograph would appear, an older Kody, alone in a coffee shop, reading an old Bible, his wedding ring missing. For the first time, he wasn't with wives, cameras, or contracts. Just a man, and the silence he used to run from. TLC, in its usual cadence, hinted at a special reunion episode. But no one was watching for drama this time, they needed closure. And what they received was a haunting, poignant conclusion. The camera rolled over images of the original Brown family residence, vacant and still. Frames on the walls were dust-encrusted, glass shattered but still containing memories. The narrator spoke softly, every family has secrets. But some secrets change the family forever. As the final montage played, clips of the family's early days blended with scenes of what came after, Christine's freedom, Mary's peace, Janelle's quiet strength, and that fleeting image of Eliza. Not as a villain or ghost, but as the symbol of what was always hidden behind the show's perfect facade. The crowd cried. Because this time, the narrative didn't conclude with strife, it concluded with reality. And reality, however harsh, had an odd sort of beauty. And then came the final shot, one that everyone least expected. Close-up of a lone note left on a wooden surface, scribbled in handwriting belonging to Kody. If love was ever true, then it was never destined to be shared this way. The screen went black. Quiet once more. Only the gentle whisper of wind. The credits rolled over a new voice, gentle, contemplative, womanly. Christine's. This isn't about hate. It's about healing. About what happens when you stop pretending and finally start living. The truth will always find its way home. And with that, the show that started out as a picture of plural love finished as an exercise in human reality, unvarnished, fractured, and exquisitely genuine. Because ultimately, The Forgotten Vows was not Kody's story alone. It was the story of every human being who ever held a falsehood to be true because it was simpler than the truth. And as the final line reads across the screen, some stories end on TV. Others begin after the cameras stop. The world was aware. The journey of sister wives had come to an end in a different way. Undefined, tell us what you think was Kody's last secret, and what freedom really meant to Christine and Mary. Don't forget to subscribe to Sister Wife Daily Scoop for more behind-the-scenes secrets in the legacy. When the cameras faded and the last reunion show aired, everybody assumed it was the end. But behind the studio lights and the perfectly scripted farewell lay one tape, one roll of raw, uncensored footage that never uploaded to TLC's servers. One lone camera remained rolling after the crew had packed up, recording one moment no one was meant to witness. It was late, almost midnight. The stage was vacant except for a few half-full cups of coffee and the distant whir of studio lights dissipating. Christine had come back to pick up her stuff, her face serene, her eyes showing something between calm and heartbreak. And then, to everyone's surprise, Kody returned. No audience. No microphones. Just two individuals in a quiet room, at last free of the script. He looked older, smaller somehow, like the weight of his own choices had finally caught up. They'll never understand what it was like, he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Christine didn't respond at first. She just looked at him, not with anger, but with the kind of quiet understanding that only comes when you've already let go. I believe they know more than you realize, she eventually spoke. And then, after what felt like an eternity, a decade's worth of silence, at least, she continued, you created something strong, Kody. You just forgot, power does not equate love. That line, they never broadcast that. But people who had watched the leaked tape described it as if it were the ultimate truth of the whole saga, one sentence that broke down years of denial. And if you think that's the end of the story, wait until you hear what happened next. Because 2 weeks on, a small production assistant leaked anonymous photos of what appeared to be a private storage space in Las Vegas. Inside were dozens of worn-out hard drives, labeled with titles such as Uncut Season 4, Vegas Move, and Untitled Wife Segment, Confidential. One of those drives supposedly had footage of Eliza, not as a mystery woman, but sitting in on a family meeting years prior to the cameras ever being turned on. TLC's lawyers acted quickly. Files went missing. Accounts were wiped out. But the damage was already done. Fans now realized that something much more significant had been suppressed all along. The sister-wives saga wasn't merely about religion or family. It was about power. About what tales get told, and which ones get deleted to safeguard the brand. And when Christine was questioned once more, months afterward, regarding Eliza, she neither denied nor affirmed anything. She merely whispered, "The truth always comes home. It takes years sometimes, but it never remains buried." That quote set the beat of the new online movement, #TheForgottenVows. No longer just a fan base, but ex-crew members, local journalists, even friends of the family posting snapshots of remembrances, old emails, contracts, and whispers of a side of the Brown family the cameras didn't catch. It wasn't about bringing anyone down. It was about reauthoring the narrative, this time, unfiltered. And perhaps that was what made this conclusion so unforgettable. Because for once, it wasn't edited. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, human reality, at long last uncut. As the documentary's final words dissipated, the narrator's voice, the very one that had taken us through love, betrayal, and redemption, whispered a final time. Perhaps this was never about polygamy, or fame, or faith. Perhaps it was always about what occurs when you cease living someone else's version of your life, and begin living your own. And then the screen went black, and all that remained was one question in white text. If the cameras had remained on, what else would we have witnessed? And so it ended with that chilling query. Comment your theory below. What do you believe was on that lost footage? Don't forget to subscribe to Sister Wife Daily Scoop for the next installment of the truth they attempted to conceal. Following the storm, there was silence. The Brown family's magnificent Flagstaff house, which used to ring with laughter, tears, and cameras, now sat nearly vacant, a testament to all that had disintegrated. The resonance of past arguments still hung in the air, ghosts that refused to depart. Robyn's giggles were no longer heard in the corridors, and Kody's once authoritative voice had softened to something delicate, even tentative. The neighbors reported that he did not venture out much anymore. The man who used to talk about building a legacy was now pacing the perimeter of his driveway in the evenings, occasionally gazing at the mountains as though looking for answers that never arrived. And somewhere within that house, Robyn sat amidst stacks of unopened mail, not from admirers, but from collectors, attorneys, and former producers. The kingdom they struggled to own was now hemorrhaging from every direction. But under the silence, something else more haunting existed: regret. Christine had gone on to create her new life in quiet confidence and beautiful grace. Janelle had reclaimed her independence. Even Mary, after all these years in emotional exile, was starting to know what freedom really was. But Kody and Robyn remained, stuck in the tale they would not allow to end. And if you believed their silence was peace, think twice. Because what ensued wasn't tranquility, it was payback. Late one night, a veteran production manager who worked on Sister Wives for years spilled that the last season nearly didn't premiere. TLC executives had grappled with whether to air the video of Kody's breakdown and Robyn's constant forlorn meltdowns as too raw, too honest for a network that once produced slick family fare. But Kody purportedly demanded that it be aired. "They have something to see my truth," he commented. Well, that truth, once on the air, caused more harm than he could have envisioned. The public sympathy turned over the course of one night. What was originally regarded as a love affair was starting to resemble a slow-motion crash, and Robyn's value, the central element that made their relationship exist, was the yardstick by which fans judged all that went wrong with the show. She wasn't the villain, not quite. But she had become the face of something more profound, the price of being the one standing in a falling-apart family picture. And here's the part that never saw its way onto the air. One insider says that as the cameras stopped rolling for the last time, Robyn made a request of the crew: wait a few more minutes. Her eyes were puffy red, her voice trembling. "People think I won," she whispered, "but you can't win when everyone else walks away." The camera guy rolled for a few extra seconds before putting the lens down. That footage also disappeared before it reached the editor's table. In the ensuing months, the network's silence was deafening. No reunion, no updates, no spin-offs. TLC's official announcement read simply, "The Brown family's journey has ended." But the viewers weren't finished watching. The story had grown larger than television, it had become a mirror. Because at the back of every headline, at the back of every episode, there was something painfully human: how love can become possession, how faith can turn into control, and how the search for validation can quietly ruin the thing that it sought to safeguard. As the sun set over that quiet house in Flagstaff, Sister Wives' story was not ending, it was changing. Enthusiasts started re-watching the earlier seasons, looking for clues they had overlooked, non-verbal cues that were now understandable, phrases that now held hidden meanings. It was no longer TV, it was research. And if you thought the world had finally left the Browns behind, just wait until you see what was found in those unejected archives, because even in silence, the truth speaks louder than ever. What do you actually think those secret tapes really prove? Share your theory in the comments below, and follow along with Sister Wives Daily Scoop as we reveal what the TLC didn't want you to see. Months went by, and what was left of the Brown family drama began to fade into internet legend, rumored about in Reddit forums, analyzed on podcasts, and put together by fans who didn't believe the saga was actually over. But hidden somewhere in a private vault owned by the network, there remained one last piece of the puzzle: the uncut final cut. It was meant to be the ultimate closure, a reflection montage of redemption and moving on. It never aired. Because according to several sources, when the editors saw that last cut, what they saw wasn't redemption, it was a confession. The video began with Kody alone in a dimmed studio, no producers, no script, only the whir of a solitary overhead light. He wasn't the self-assured patriarch of before, but merely a man bare of pretension, his face weighed down by time and honesty. He started to talk slowly, as though every word had a lifetime of remorse behind it. "Love meant leadership," he whispered. "I figured if I gave them enough, they'd remain. I figured I could juggle everything. But perhaps I was also trying to prove that I mattered too." It wasn't the sort of admission fans had anticipated. No rage remained, no denial, no apologies. Only weariness, the sort that results when a dream becomes an encumbrance. He hesitated, and then spoke directly into the camera. "And Robyn," he said, shaking slightly, "she didn't ruin this family. I did. Because I made her my reason for everything, and by doing that, took everyone else's reason away." That line struck like a thunderbolt. It wasn't improvised. It wasn't edited by the TLC editors. It was genuine, unvarnished and raw. And that's exactly why it never made it out of the gate. When network executives viewed the footage, they allegedly concluded it was too human, too far from the brand of the show. The viewers, they worried, weren't ready to view Kody not as a figure of leadership or as an enemy, but as an individual facing the wreckage of his own making. The scene was kept under wraps. The tone of the documentary changed. The season premiered with an ably cut-off finale that discussed growth and new beginnings. But that reality, the one shot under the lone bulb, remained concealed. And yet fragments of it emerged online, leaked from shadowy accounts that seemed to have eerily intimate access. Grainy video clips. Transcripts in part. One even filmed when Kody looked over at the vacant chair next to him, the one reserved for Robyn, and whispered, "If you ever see this, I hope you forgive me." The internet went into overdrive. Theories ran rampant. Was it love? Was it guilt? Or was it the ultimate realization that the whole fantasy of spiritual unity had turned out to be a hurtful mirage? Meanwhile, Robyn herself disappeared from sight. No interviews, no sightings, no comment. Her social media accounts fell silent. For some, it was guilt. For others, grace. But to most, it was simply another question that would never be answered. And that's when the fans realized something hauntingly poetic. Maybe this was the ending the show was always meant to have, not a perfect conclusion, but an unfinished story. Because polygamy, power, and pain don't tie up neatly in one episode. They linger, like echoes of choices that can't be undone. So as the screen goes black in that fictional final cut, the voiceover comes back, soft, contemplative, human. Love built the dream. Pride burned it down. And in the ashes, they finally found the truth. And silence. Just like the house in Flagstaff. Just like Robyn's final post. Just like the legacy of a family that attempted to live a story too large for reality itself. And as the final frame dissolves, a solitary question is shown. If this was the truth, would TLC ever dare to show it? Leave your comments below. Was this the confession that might have altered the course of history? Tune in to Sister Wives Daily Scoop as we keep digging up the secrets they didn't want you to know. Time is what makes even the hardest corners smooth, but in the universe the Browns created and abandoned, the resonance kept growing louder. The show might be over, the lights might have been extinguished, but the dialogue never ceased. It evolved into something else, something much stronger than any season of TLC could have ever penned. Clips went viral. Quotations were recontextualized. The internet started treating Sister Wives as a case study, not entertainment, an anatomy of control, adoration, and collapse. The narrative had transcended the Browns themselves. It had turned into a reflection of how easily faith and family can crumble when constructed on shaky foundations. But in those sporadic echoes, there were a few whispers that stood out, the whispers of what Robyn was up to now. Sources within the family said she'd slipped away, quietly, out of view, to a small house miles from Flagstaff. No cameras, no script, no crowd. Just her and her kids, and perhaps the specter of all that she'd believed was love. She'd gotten back into painting, the peaceful art she'd adored long before all this. Or she was writing, keeping diaries no one else would ever get to read. Perhaps it was how she got her voice back, how she could finally tell her side of things without it being interrupted by headlines or cuts. In the meantime, Kody was spotted every now and then, at church suppers, never smiling. His golden curls were grayer now, his attitude less rebellious. Those who did recognize him spoke of the same thing, a man who seemed to have lived his whole life before him and was still waiting for an ending that would be meaningful. And if you believe that's where the tale dissolves into tranquility, it doesn't. Because even years down the line, the past has a peculiar penchant for coming back. One night, a former TLC staffer posted something enigmatic on an abandoned forum. The story wasn't supposed to end there. There was always a part 2. Within hours, it was erased, but screenshots were all over every fan page and subreddit. What did they mean, a part 2? Another secret project? A second family? For weeks, speculation poured in. Some thought Kody had been talked to about a redemption-type show, one in which he'd face his errors and start anew. Others thought the tape in the Lost Vault hadn't been lost at all, but secretly being remastered for some other release. But amid all speculation, one statement stood out, buried deep within leaked email exchanges between ex-producers. The story didn't end with the family falling apart. It ended when they realized it had never been real. That line hit viewers to their very center. It wasn't about the Browns anymore, it was about illusion. About how love, religion, and even stardom can bleed together until nobody knows what's real and what's acting. And perhaps that's why Sister Wives is still relevant, because it was never about polygamy. It was about human vulnerability, about the need to be included, and the quiet fear of being forgotten. As the years went by, Kody and Robyn's legacy became a cautionary tale. University lectures, documentaries, podcasts, all analyzing one question: how much truth can a family keep hidden before it starts falling apart from the inside out? The Brown dynasty might have collapsed, but the reverberations linger, infinite, haunting, and unaccountably poetic. In each repeat, in each fan argument, in each conspiracy talked about late at night, their tale endures, not because it was flawless, but because it was authentic in all those ways reality television didn't anticipate. And perhaps that's the ultimate truth here: reality doesn't end when the cameras stop filming. It ends when the people forget. But as long as the world continues to wonder what actually happened behind those walls, the Browns, and the secrets they held, will never truly vanish. What did you really think of Part 2? A sequel, or the hidden ending TLC never meant for us to see? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to follow Sister Wife Daily Scoop for the next revelation in the saga that refuses to remain buried. For years, everyone thought that all had already been revealed, that the truth about Kody, Robyn, and the shattered empire of sister wives had finally exhausted itself. But these stories don't finish when the cameras do. They finish when the final secret is revealed, and there was still one, hidden deeper than anyone could have guessed. It started quietly, a post on a backwoods fanboard. A poster said he had found an old production receipt from TLC's Las Vegas period. Nothing out of the ordinary at first, until they saw something strange: a listed payment to a name that didn't appear to match any of the known producers, wives, or crew. The name was Eliza M., the same enigmatic name that had been the subject of fan theories for years, sans confirmation. The fifth wife. The woman who, rumor had it, was a part of Kody's life well before Robyn came on the scene. The discovery reignited everything. Fans who had followed the Browns for more than a decade began connecting dots: subtle references, fleeting expressions, and unspoken tension that suddenly made sense. There were moments in early seasons where Mary's eyes flickered toward Kody with something deeper than jealousy, something more like betrayal. There were episodes where Christine looked ready to speak but stayed silent as the cameras rolled. And then the photo. Released anonymously to a minor YouTube channel, the photo depicted a young woman standing with Kody on the family's early days in Utah. She was not one of the 4 wives we knew. She was smiling slightly, her hand on his shoulder in a way that seemed familiar. The internet erupted. Who was she? Why had she been erased from the show's history? And what did her disappearance mean for the family's legacy? The network initially brushed it all away, made up, they claimed, disinformation. But the report wouldn't go away. Too many small facts fell into place, too many witnesses whispered discreetly about someone who wasn't supposed to be named. Even a former audio technician admitted in a podcast interview, there were scenes we were instructed never to mark, never to log under her name. She was there, but only behind the shadows of the cut room. And that was when the most sensational revelation came along. Eliza wasn't merely a part of Kody's history, she was purportedly the reason behind the creation of the Sister Wives project itself. According to one insider, the original idea was presented to TLC as a rebuilding story, a man trying to rebuild his plural household after a secret marriage fell apart. If that's the case, then Sister Wives wasn't capturing Kody's journey towards spiritual development. It was capturing his cover story. And if you believe that sounds too crazy to be true, keep in mind that reality TV isn't about truth. It's about control. The threads started to come undone quickly. Emails, draft scripts, payment records. It all led to one conclusion: Eliza existed. Her narrative had been hidden, rewritten, and substituted with the more commercial introduction of Robyn, the favorite wife, the drama queen, the story savior. But by doing so, the foundation of the whole show was a lie. And perhaps that's why the Browns' empire eventually collapsed, because you can't construct truth upon omission. Somewhere in the world, Eliza may still be observing, silent as she ever was. Perhaps she's moved on. Perhaps she's waiting for her moment to share her version of the story. But one thing is definite, her ghost permeates every cut of Sister Wives. Every look. Every hesitation. Every line that seemed ever so slightly too rehearsed. And as this epiphany spread, fans started wondering the question that even TLC couldn't silence anymore. If Eliza was the start of the story, was Robyn ever supposed to be the end? No word was spoken. No denial, no verification. Only silence, the kind which sounds louder than words. Because ultimately, every empire crumbles not by enemies, but because of the secrets it attempts to conceal. So what do you think? Was Eliza the missing wife who rewrote everything we thought we knew? Drop your theory below, and keep watching Sister Wife Daily Scoop, where the truth about the Browns never stays buried for long. The morning light spread out over Flagstaff like a quiet promise, golden, forgiving, and full of possibility. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy with secrets. The storm had finally blown itself out. Kody looked out of the window of the old family house, gazing at the world he once ruled, now dispersed in the wind like the leaves of a book that had been read, judged, and closed. Christine's laughter echoed faintly from a phone call with her children, and Mary's car rolled quietly down the hill, her face calm, not angry, just done. Even Janelle's messages to the group chat no longer carried tension, only peace. It was as if every broken piece had found its place, not back in the same picture, but in a new mosaic that made more sense than before. The shadow of the forgotten wife, Eliza, the mysterious one, no longer cast a ghostly presence. The truth was told, the silence was shattered, and in that open honesty, the family at last was able to breathe. The secret wedding once ready to tear everything apart had, in a twist, freed them. Kody stepped away from the window and glanced up at the old family photos on the wall. His younger self glared back, self-assured, resolute, blinded by conviction. Today, he saw a man who had discovered that control is not love, silence is not strength. He spoke softly, as if to the ghost of the woman he used to hide, "I'm sorry, Eliza. You deserved better." Across town, Christine sat in a cafe with an unobtrusive smile, observing her daughter play outside. The world had moved on, but her peace rang louder than any scandal. The show had ended for her a long time ago, and real life had just started. A soft piano melody sounded in the background as the narrator's voice became soft. Because ultimately, only truth endures. The cameras can distort, the contracts can be voided, and the headlines can deteriorate, but the strength it took to speak, to leave, and to begin anew remains. They each, in their own unique manner, had freed themselves. The Sister Wives drama started out as a tale of faith, love, and togetherness, but it ended up something more profound, a testament that no matter how broken the family is, there is always time for healing, redemption, and hope. And as the screen gently glows gold, one last line rings out. Sometimes, to protect the truth, you have to lose everything else first. The breeze sweeps that line away, leaving only an image of Christine on a sunny hilltop, unbroken, free, and at last at peace. And so this chapter, The Forgotten Vows, Kody's secret marriage, ends not in sorrow, but in light. If you've been on this journey and experienced each of the concealed truths, each of the tears, and each of the epiphanies, don't stop here. Share what you think the truth actually is. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, we read all of them. And if you're someone who believes in tales that have the courage to reveal that which other people conceal, don't forget to subscribe to Sister Wife reality show, where the untold truth is always heard. Because the Sister Wives story isn't finished. It's only now beginning to be told for real.